Anita, for that great introduction. And this is Marta speaking, and James will also be co-presenting with me, and you'll hear his voice in just a few minutes. Before we delve into the content, and Juanita already provided some highlights of what we will talk about and cover, wanted to just go through a little bit of our agenda. So we want to talk to you about the value of evaluation today and share with you some practical and pragmatic tips and best practices of how you can embrace this topic in this area within your own organization. And hopefully the information that you see here today will be of help to you. And also want to stress again, as Juanita mentioned, there's an opportunity to ask questions, so feel free to type those in as they come to you, and we will try to address them during or at the end of the webinar. And also encourage you to participate in the forum on Friday, where you'll have an opportunity to ask more questions, and we'll be able to answer them as well. So again, just quickly going through the agenda, we'll talk about evaluation, the importance and the value of creating a culture of evaluation within your organization. So evaluation isn't just something you do once a year, but something that's really embedded in how you manage your organization, and ways to conduct an evaluation, and then what to do with the results and how you can really leverage the results for the benefits of yourselves and your particular roles, but also within your organization more broadly. And we'll end with some key takeaways. So going into that, let's get started very quickly. What we wanted to do is just get a sense of who's on the phone today. If you could answer through the polling mechanism, if you're a staff member, press 1, a member of the leadership team, press 2, the executive director, 3, a board member, 4, or if you fall into another category in terms of your role within the organization, then please press 5. We'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and then we'll share the results of the poll. So just a few more seconds to give everybody a chance to identify themselves and their role within the organization. And then we will let you know who's on the line today. And there's a very even split of 50% staff today and 50% leadership. And so that's really great, a good representation within our organizations. And something that's really important to stress when we talk about the topic of evaluation and of measurement is that any level within the organization can really take on the role of ownership and driving evaluations within your organization. So whether if you're a leadership member of the leadership team, then certainly you have that opportunity to set the tone at the top in terms of the importance of evaluation and what you can do to leverage current practices and to move evaluation even further. And if you're a staff member, you can also either bring this up or take some ownership over evaluation. And we'll talk about ways to do that in a tangible manner when we get into more of the slides as we move through this information. So now that we know who's on the line, let's delve into the topic of evaluation. And the first thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention is that common reference point. And by reviewing OCASI's own definition, we can see it right on the screen here. Effective program evaluation does more than collect, analyze, and provide data. It makes it possible for you, the program stakeholders, to gather and use information, to learn continually about and improve programs that you operate in or fund. What we would really like to stress today is the importance of taking a holistic approach when it comes to evaluation and measurement. It's to look at both the qualitative and the quantitative information that you gather. We'd like to encourage you to integrate measurement discussions into your annual and or quarterly planning, into performance reviews, and into other important milestones within your organization, so that continuous discussions are encouraged and evaluations don't simply seep in at the end of the year or as a necessary input to funding applications. Really to encourage you not just to evaluate, but to leverage the findings and as an opportunity to continuously improve and continuously motivate your staff and other stakeholders. And this will be an important reference point and one that we really encourage you to look at and to evaluate your own program and where it's at in terms of this really broad definition or point that we'll come back to, and we'll review this as we move through today's webinar as well. So one of the first things we want to talk about or review is why would we even want to evaluate? Certainly for many organizations, the impetus to evaluate comes from meeting funding requirements. Our funders need to ensure that the money they are giving us via grants or other means is used effectively, and certainly often asking for specific measurements in terms of number of people being served or different initiatives that are being launched and how that funding is used. But for most organizations, that might be where you end things at and you evaluate for that sole purpose. Really what we want to encourage today is to look at the other opportunities that evaluation brings. So one is to unearth the information about the program that will help you plan and improve it. And this is really that notion of continuous improvement. While many things might be working well within your program, looking at ways to improve the program, you can find those tactical examples as you evaluate, as you get findings, and then you really take a look at what those findings mean and use them in a way to continuously improve your program. Next opportunity is to promote a culture of evaluative thinking and ongoing learning. And this is really key to building a vibrant organization that again is focused on continuous improvement. And this is where that notion of engaging people at all levels within the organization can be further emphasized, that it's not just a tone from the top or just the leadership team that's involved in those evaluation conversations or decisions or actions, but it can be something that can really promote a culture of continuous improvement and evolution across the organization. And another important reason to evaluate is to increase the program buy-in of stakeholders and participants. An evaluation can create a sense of ownership and accountability amongst stakeholders, whether they be internal stakeholders or external stakeholders. It also helps others to really understand the commitment involved in terms of running your program or in terms of rolling out specific initiatives within your program. When you have that opportunity to showcase the qualitative and quantitative measurements, really give people a good overview of what's involved in your program. So just one more opportunity to gauge from you through a quick poll. We wanted to ask, again, please provide your answers by clicking one of the 4 scenarios. Within your organization, does your organization use the logic model for its program evaluation? A variety of approaches, including the logic model for its evaluation. Your organization is planning to use the logic model for future evaluations, or is not able to evaluate its programs. You are all likely familiar with the logic model and know that OCASI standards recommend this model for evaluation as a preferred method. We won't be going into the details of the logic model today. There's certainly lots of very useful information on the org-wide site, and hopefully you're already familiar with that process. What we want to gauge through this poll is to see where you are in terms of your evaluation implementation efforts and how the logic model might play into that at this point. Again, this is an anonymous poll, so we're not looking to see whether you're doing things well or not well or point any fingers, just to gauge again based on who's on the call where you are at currently within your own organization. So we'll give you a few seconds again, and then we'll share the results of all our participants. So about 23% of our listeners have used the logic model. 64% use a variety of models, and 7% are in the planning stages of using evaluation. So again, great diversity, and hopefully after this session you'll have some more tactical examples and takeaways to to add into your evaluation conversations. And on that note, I will pass things over to James now, and he will take us through the next section.
Hi, welcome ladies and gentlemen. My name's James. I'm your guide through the next section of this, so please sit back, put your seatbelts on, close your eye. Oh no, don't close your eyes. Sorry, you got to keep looking at the screen. I know you're all familiar with, or I assume you're all familiar with OCASI's organizational standards. And I want to just run over a couple of things in that where they speak to evaluation. So the first standard is our organization engages with and responds to and measures our impact on the immigrant and refugees we serve. That's fairly straightforward, but what it does do is it encapsulates the importance of measuring the impact. And the second a place this turns up in the standards is as follows. Our organization promotes a culture of evaluative thinking and ongoing learning to improve our programs, services, and operations. Again, that's pretty straightforward. What's key there in this clause is the sense of ongoing learning, and that's really what evaluative thinking is. It's ongoing learning. So that this is your constant state of mind. This is the culture of your organization. So creating a culture of evaluative thinking in your agency is extremely valuable. So first of all, here's a definition. Evaluative thinking is a type of reflective practice that incorporates use of systematically collected data to inform organizational actions. And again, that's sort of the key things in this definition are it's a practice, i.e. it's not something you do once in a while, it's a practice, and the whole sense of systematically collected data. And that's really what the logic model, or in fact any evaluation, but particularly the logic model, is based on systematically collecting data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We'll review some of the ways that can happen. The result of this is you learn things about your organization that can inform the decisions it makes. So creating a culture of evaluation in your organization is the foundation of successful evaluative thinking and learning. And this comes out of a couple of documents that are on the OrgWise website, which I'll say this several times, but the OrgWise website is utterly fabulous in terms of what it has pulled together on the subject of evaluation. It would take you days to find that yourself. So it's really excellent. So there are two documents there, GEO Evaluation Essentials, and then in previous forums, Emmanuel Melez has done a distillation of it in a presentation that's called 4 Essentials for Evaluation. There's a list of all these at the end of the presentation today, but I believe it'll also be sent out to you so you can use it as a resource to find these easily. So back to the point, creating a culture of evaluation. I expect you all have some idea of how to create and develop a culture in an organization. I'm talking about any sort of culture. You know that it's hard, detailed work. It progresses one step at a time, and it takes time. That it needs to start with the leadership, and that often should include the board. That it means empowering and valuing those in your organization that do the evaluating, though everyone will be included at some point. And also that it's a selling job. You've got to be constantly selling the staff on the benefits and learnings they will see. Evaluation is not something that happens without some work. And sometimes this work in the cut and thrust of doing your program week after week, it can seem very onerous. So you have to sell people on the benefits of doing it, i.e. that the work they put into it will bring them something more out the other end. You'll also know when you're successful in creating this culture that it's embedded in the day-to-day operation of the agency and that everyone reaps the benefits. And I'll mention again something that Marta referred to, and that is that the idea of evaluation and the importance of evaluation can be driven by anyone in the organization. It can be driven by multiple people in the organization. It doesn't have to come from just the managers. from the executive director or the board. So that's an important thing. So if it's your program and you understand the value of this, then you can be the driver that actually makes this happen. And trust me, no manager is going to stand in your way if you say, hey, I want to evaluate my program, because they know it's important, and they also know that it's hard to do. So if you're willing to do it as the program manager, then I can assure you it'll happen. Well, I can almost assure you. I'm not there. I'm not you. So we're just going to go through some sort of high-level parts of and key parts of the process of doing an evaluation. So, and then at the end, we're going to talk about some of the benefits you can get out of that. So, preparing to evaluate and setting the goals. So, a good evaluation begins with setting the right goals, and I can't tell you how important this is, because if you aren't able to do that, then the evaluation will not necessarily go off the rails, but it won't bring you something out the other end that you can use. So, a primary goal in evaluation is to contribute to the improvement of the program. Simply, does the program work and how can it be improved? Alternate goals can be, is the program worthwhile? Are there unintended consequences? Are there alternatives that would be better? So let's assume we're evaluating with the goal of, quote, contributing to the improvement of the program. We arrive at this information by systematically assessing the operation and outcomes of the program. These are then compared to a set of explicit or implicit standards, which sometimes in the in various situations, the business world and in organizations, are referred to as benchmarks or targets. The comparison, i.e., are we achieving what we've set out to do? The comparison of the outcomes versus the benchmarks gives us the information to assess the success of the program and to consider how we can improve it. Breaking the evaluation down into a number of components or outcomes shows us where the results are falling short and where the program weakness might be. And that's essentially what the evaluation does for you. The real key is asking the right questions, meaning being as precise as possible about what outcomes are being looked at, i.e., are we measuring what we want to measure, or what is it that we want to measure so we can measure it? Just one final thing, some of these points are in another excellent document on the OrgWise site called Evaluation Beginner's Guide. And it's only about 7 pages long, and it gives you most of what you need to know. Some of the other documents are 50 or 100 pages long and are a bit scary to take a look at. So moving on, so determining program benchmarks. So you need to know what specific goals, also called benchmarks, performance targets, objectives, as I've mentioned, you're looking for from the program. And how you state them is key to getting the information from the evaluation. So you need to state them in a way that is, as we say, smart. I'll come to that in a moment. So when you measure these things and when you measure the right things, then you are able to get the information you need out the other end. So, and this is just a little reminder that if you don't get started, then it'll never happen. That'll come up again, actually. So evaluation goals or benchmarks, in fact, every part of it, but let's talk about the goals that you're establishing for your program. And you've probably come across this. This is sort of a measure that's used in a variety of different situations. It can be used, for example, in performance management in trying to establish the goals between a supervisor and a direct report. The idea is that these goals need to be smart, and which means they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, and measurable is the key. And if they're specific and measurable, you're 90% of the way there. They need to be attainable, so don't set a goal that you can't possibly reach. and they need to be realistic, or relevant, which means they need to be part of what the program's actually supposed to be doing, and they need to be time bound in the sense that, for example, if you're evaluating a period of a year, don't go back and bring in data from 6 months before that. So it's very hard to come up with goals that are smart, and I know personally I've spent lots of time banging my head against the wall trying to figure out exactly how to word a goal or a question so it is smart. But it's worth the exercise. If you spend a few minutes off the top doing that, then in fact the rest of it will fall into place quite easily. So just a note, don't measure what you can't use. Concentrate on what you need. Your funders, concentrate on what you need, what your funders need, and that will give you the information you need to improve the program's impact. And don't try to measure everything in your evaluation, especially the first time you tackle it. Like most things, we should expect evaluations to get better when we do them second and third times. They can be more precise, you can measure additional aspects, and so on. The important thing is to get started, and that's back to taking the baby steps, taking the first steps, getting started. So quantitative versus qualitative is a point we thought was worth talking about. It's not always defined in the logic model process, but it's usually buried in the language. It's very important to understand the difference. So funders frequently like to know, and sometimes only want to know, the quantitative information. And that's fairly straightforward. How many people did you reach? How many clients reached a certain skill level? Did the program justify its cost? And this accountability is important, and of course it's extremely important to getting the money the next year. But it may not give you everything you want to know to make your program better for its participants. So your organization can also learn from qualitative results. So what specific program practices were the most important to achieving a successful outcome? And that's something you can measure, for example. Another example, what program practices were so effective, you should increase them next year, even if the funding level stays the same. So these are the kinds of things that you'll also want to measure, and you'll want to measure them. If no one else wants to know, you will want to know, because that's the basis on which you can make judgments and decide on actions that will be able to improve the program. So qualitative measurement in this context is essentially evaluative learning, an indicator we mentioned before. So, and it systematically analyzes the aspects of a program that will give you information that will help you make decisions on how you can develop them into a more effective service for your clients. Now, and I'll just mention here, there are some examples of the kinds of good questions that can lead to evaluative measurements in a couple of documents on the OrgWise website. One's actually a presentation by Manuel Melez called Evaluation Basics and Various Approaches, and there's a document called Integrating Evaluative Capacity into Organizational Practice. And again, these are listed in the end in the bibliography. So, preparing to evaluate, identifying the participants. So most programs have multiple stakeholders, and it's important to involve them in the evaluation process. So your stakeholders may be the organization leadership, the program managers and staff, the program participants and clients, funders, board members, community members, and perhaps others. You need to take an inventory. Your program may involve other people or another group of people that should be involved in the evaluation. So the funder may or may not attend, of course, though they'll certainly want to receive the results. Board members and community members might not be appropriate participants if they're not involved or directly impacted by the program being evaluated. However, I would mention here that back to the idea of establishing a culture of evaluation in your organization. If you have a board member too that is interested in being part of the process, because they'll learn from it, and they'll then, as a result of that, they'll understand the value of this, it might be worth including them if they're available, just as less as participants and more as observers in the process. Because an evaluation, when it works, is quite fabulous. And the sense of satisfaction when you get it done and you get the results and you realize what you've learned from them is quite enormous. So even as an observer, to be part of that would be very valuable in terms of promoting the culture and extending this as far up as the board. Now, some or all of these participants may be included in data collection as well as analyzing the data and reporting results. And you won't have all your staff participants in the actual, or all your staff and program participants in your evaluation, but you have representatives. And I'll say again, the first three on the list, leadership, managers and staff, and participants, are the key participants in the evaluation process. So I'm going to hand back to Marta now, who's going to carry on with the next section.
Thank you, James. So now we want to talk a little bit about gathering feedback. And really want to stress that it's important to collect meaningful data for an evaluation using more than one method. And James has already really stressed this notion of collecting meaningful data, because you want to make sure that you go through that initial thoughtful planning process that will be important to invest that time early on, and it will really help to fuel this process. So I want to look at some qualitative and also quantitative ways of gathering feedback. So the first one, record and document review, is really looking at the information that you probably already have because your funders are requiring this information, or it's data that helps you measure the impact and success of your program. This may be data such as enrollment numbers, attendance, how many program graduates were placed in jobs. Might be specific in terms of your organization and your organization's activities, but it's really looking at all of that administrative data that you have, and seeing what kind of feedback opportunities it provides. The next is surveys, which can give you information on things like how many clients were satisfied with the program, what are its strengths and improvement opportunities. So perhaps there is an exit survey that happens with your employee population. Perhaps there's surveys that happen at the end of any programs or initiatives that you have on a regular basis, or one-offs. Any types of solicitation for feedback from participants. The next interviews is a quantitative approach and can provide you more detailed feedback. It's a great way to get a more candid overview, potentially even on some of those more sensitive topics or details that might not be easy to gauge through a survey or through a broader touch point. The questions can be set in advance, and the answers are usually quite detailed. It can be a one-on-one conversation or conversations with several survey participants, several interview participants, depending on how it's structured. You want to make sure that your interview lists include a diverse range of people involved in the program, so you're not just getting perspective from one vantage point, but from different levels potentially, and different stakeholders. And again, taking the time to set the stage, letting people know how the information will be used or shared, if it will be anonymous, or if they give you an opportunity to share the details of who they are, and any other relevant details to make sure that you build that rapport with whoever is being interviewed, and that conversation or interview process really encourages honest discussion, because as much of a rapport as you can build, you will get all those detailed answers and information, and a lot of information will likely be positive. Some might be negative, but you need to really be also open to that and to embracing that, because part of that successful evaluation is not just knowing the things that are working really well, but also being in touch with the things that maybe need to be improved. And from somebody's vantage point, they might be able to share that with you through an interview process. Next opportunity for gathering feedback is through observation, and that is really through observing what is happening, whether with your staff, with a specific part of the program or a specific part of your organization. But it's really having that, that cognizant approach to observation and taking the time to observe, perhaps writing things down as you see them, perhaps giving yourself a time frame in which you will be making observations about a program or about a population, and gathering that information and documenting in a way where you can gather that meaningful data, which is what we're always looking for in any of these formats of feedback. And the last example or suggestion that we would have is to conduct a focus group. Now, a focus group might require some additional logistics in terms of defining who will be part of that conversation, and it's essentially an interview that happens with multiple people being interviewed and discussions taking place, but it can be a great opportunity to really get valuable insights. You might be facilitating that yourself, or might want to have an external or neutral facilitator to ensure that there is that engagement and that honest conversation happening. It can be a really great way in a fairly short period of time to bring diverse stakeholders together and to have that candid conversation through which you will get, again, meaningful information and that meaningful data to help you with your evaluation journey. Now, one of the things we'd really like to stress in terms of your approach to gathering feedback is to look at using multiple methods. That way they can complement each other and you can really derive the best data from a variety of sources. You also want to make sure that you're planning ahead and you're not duplicating information, and you're really taking a planned project management approach in terms of your data gathering so that you receive the most amount of data, the best and most meaningful data, but still taking into account the participants' time and your own time that's going to be involved in terms of gathering feedback. And certainly something that we don't encourage is what's in the cartoon here in terms of trying to gather as much stuff as possible and then figuring out what to do with it after. Again, going back to James's really important point is really planning out and making a conscious effort to think through what data you need, what data you want, and how you're going to go about collecting it. Something we really want to highlight, and hope it will be a key and important takeaway for you. And again, ArcWise site, as James has mentioned multiple times, and we're not getting paid to say this, but it has really great resources that we encourage you to look upon. The next piece we want to look at is looking at sort of the tangible next steps. We've set the groundwork. We understand that evaluations are important. We want to go ahead and do that. Who will lead this? How do we take a stab at really getting into the midst of our evaluation journey? So certainly one opportunity is to hire an outside expert, which is expensive and not feasible for many agencies. However, if you can afford it, it's important to recognize that this is a valid expense because you're really investing in your program and in your participants. And once you do that, potentially the first time around, you'll really set the stage for having that evaluation model in place and that culture of evaluation that you can then build on independently. So that outside expert might come in and help you really to lay that groundwork and that important foundation that James was referring to, that is so important in terms of getting this started and getting this right. Next option or opportunity is to invest in training of a staff member or several staff members, so the expertise becomes part of your organization and is in-house. Again, this can be expensive and time-consuming at first, but you have that information internally that you can then leverage multiple times over the years, and could also really see it as an opportunity to boost staff morale and give someone within the organization an opportunity to grow professionally. So giving them that training opportunity and that exposure of ownership in terms of an evaluation program or in terms of owning the evaluation of an initiative or part of the program can really be a great enhancer to someone's own career journey and an additional investment and step that might be important for your personnel, and also really reinforces the buy-in that's taken place in your organization in terms of that culture, because you're investing in an evaluation and you're investing in your people. Next would be teaching yourself from the many models and information available on the subject on the Uruguay site. So that really would mean taking that reading list, which is at the end of this presentation and will be available to you, and going through all those resources that James has highlighted and looking at how we can leverage that information and apply it to our own program, to our own organization. And it's a bit of a self-study method, perhaps not as intense and not as formalized as option 2 or option 1, but might be a quick win and a great starting point if you don't have those resources or don't have the ability to invest a bit farther, but really want to get started and want to build on a lot of the great work and resources that are already available. And number 4, which is really important and something we're going to encourage, not just in this webinar, but in the whole series of webinars that we'll be coming back to you with, is the opportunity to really exchange best practices amongst each other. So look for opportunities to work together. You should look for that in a variety of different topics and areas, but evaluation really lends itself well to coming to the table in terms of several agencies that have a similar mandate, or maybe are geographically close, or maybe are working on a specific initiative already, and have that conversation. What are we already measuring or not? Learn from each other, exchange best practices, and that would also help to fuel that culture of evaluation, not just within your own organization, but across agencies, which will get you so much more powerful data in the long term as you share what you're already measuring and maybe aren't, and can look at others and see what they're doing, and that might spark ideas for yourself as well. It might also lead to you then making those larger investments in terms of option 1 or 2 together. So some suggestions for you, hopefully some that you can think about and take away after today's webinar and discuss with your broader community within your own organization. Now, going back to, again, those important reference points, want to cite, again, a brief desired benefit of evaluation that comes from OCASI's organizational standards, which is our organization makes improvements to programs and services based on our evaluation of the impact they have on clients and community members. And that word impact is really important and very impactful in terms of having the relevance and being relevant to various stakeholders. So getting more tangible again, because we really did want to share some practical tips, tools, best practices with you. I want to share this specific tool in terms of creating a sample action plan. So as you think through, okay, I'm listening to this webinar, this information all sounds great. I know what my role is, where my organization is at. What do I do next? What do I do after this? One of the things you can do is create a very simple action plan. You can start with this template or create one that works for your organization. But this really is to get you thinking about your own state of evaluation and measurement. The hard part is always sticking to it. So a simple model where you really highlight who's responsible or who has ownership for evaluation for a particular program or a subset, or perhaps for evaluation overall in the organization, and then putting some deadlines, some timelines, some actual to-dos and steps together is really important in terms of materializing this journey. And the other very important step we would encourage you is to actually write this down. So while you might have had conversations in the past around evaluation and things you would do or wouldn't do, putting together a plan that is a little more formal in nature, and by that simply having it on paper and sharing it with people, will make everyone more accountable in terms of taking those next steps towards not just articulating an action plan, but moving forward with it. And something that we've added to this simple action plan template is also a sign-off or completion, And this also we think is important in terms of that overall accountability and then making sure that everyone's going through the steps, through the motions, and there's that official sign-off of, yes, we've launched evaluation, we've gathered the data, and now we're going to do something about that data. So something we encourage you after this call when you have the time to get together with the right folks in your organization to think through what would our action plan look like within our own organization and given our own landscape. So the next thing we wanted to look at with you and give you again some practical tips and best practices is what to do with your results. So you've gone through the process, you have some results. One of the things you might do is write a report, or perhaps multiple reports, as you may have different stakeholders that need information shared in different ways. And there are some great guidelines in the Program Manager's Guide to Evaluation that's again available on the OrgWise website. We also encourage you to include both positive and negative findings. If everything is all rosy and perfect, people might not necessarily believe that. Usually there are opportunities for improvement, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing that you have knowledge of them and are doing things to work towards improving things. So really be as transparent as you need to be for the population that you're sharing your results with, and make sure you get back to the folks that you asked information from to either send them a synthesized version of results or let them know what's happening with the results. So there's that continued dialogue, and you're strengthening your relationships with your stakeholders. Next is leverage your results. Really do something about them. So whether that's putting in place a plan of how you will engage your stakeholders, what you're going to do with your own staff, your board or advisors, what information you might share with your funders, or what are some implications of the results in terms of the funding you're currently getting or might be getting in the future, and what other organizations can benefit from this information. And this is where that piece around sharing with each other and amongst organizations might come into play as well. As you look at each other's results, perhaps there's again more learnings that can happen as you think through what can we do next in order to continue on the positive results we have and to improve those that are maybe not as positive as we would like them to be. Develop an action plan to make changes, and again that can be one overall action plan, or there can be specific action plans with respect to different parts of the evaluation or different information you've received, depending on your organization, resources, and all those other things. And make sure that that action plan is written down and formally articulated. So again, there's clear accountability of who's owning it and who's seeing it through. And use learnings as a planning tool for the next program cycle or any other programs that you're developing. Really build on your successes year to year. Leverage all of those evaluations to promote change in your organization. And I'll hand it off back to James now to start wrapping up.
Hi, it's me again. So I'm going to take you through the home stretch now, and I promise you a soft landing. So I just want to follow on from the last point that was that Martin mentioned, which was using learnings as a planning tool for the next program cycle and or for program development. And there is, in fact, a lot that can be done with the information that you've acquired in your evaluation. And there is a tendency in all of us, of course, to say, okay, fine, that's done, great, I'll put it away, I've satisfied everybody's requirements, and now I'm just going to go back to writing the program. But in fact, in a good evaluation unearths information that you can use to guide some decisions that you have to make along the way. And here are some suggestions. This is not a comprehensive list necessarily. The limitations are only our imaginations, but here's some suggestions. So first of all, in recruiting, evaluation results speak to gaps in capacity and resourcing, and the kinds of skills and knowledge you'll need moving forward. It can help to refine existing job descriptions or identify the need to add a particular expertise to your team. Performance management. So if you're at the stage in your organization that you do have a performance management system, and you may not be, but I expect it's something that you will move to when you can. Evaluation results can help in setting performance objectives and indicators for you and your team, both quantitative and qualitative. So setting targets and goals. Evaluation can help orient you towards realistic goal setting and objectives, and that's important. So if you've identified the fact that your program only achieved 3/4 of the initial goal, and you discovered that in the evaluation, then you may want to revise your goals for the next, because you may realize that they were simply unattainable so far, and it will take you 3 years to get there. So this can then be fed back into the goal setting for the next year. This also is an important tool to help you and your team manage both time, priorities, and workloads. So developing funding proposals. Evaluations are good at letting you know where your gaps lie and where additional programs or resourcing could be effective. They're also an excellent guide to building a case for establishing a required need that can influence your funders. And I can't overemphasize how important that is. And you may have sensed that this was an issue, but if you can actually identify it through the evaluation, you actually have concrete evidence that then can be part of a funding proposal or a discussion that you have with your funding representative. And finally, in relationship building, evaluation can serve as a rallying tool that brings both your internal and external stakeholders together towards shaping and executing a shared vision, and this is always important in an organization. If they're not part of your advisory committee or any of your other working groups, here's a reason to reach out to other organizations either to gain their expertise or share yours. And again, I'll mention that collaboration is an important standard. It's a standard because it's an important way of operating, and it's a valuable way of operating. So let me just put it that way. It's a standard for OCASI, but it's a standard because it makes everybody's job easier and better. And this evaluation results is an excellent opportunity to use your work to help others, i.e. other organizations, and in return we'd hope they would do the same with their evaluation results. So laying the groundwork for future evaluations, and these are just a few tips in terms of considering and not forgetting about the fact that you will have another evaluation in, say, a year's time, and doing some work along the way that it will that hopefully will make it better. So there's some regular feedback mechanisms that you can build in very easily. So first of all, regular program check-ins or formal scorecards, particularly with your program staff, to find out how they think the program's doing. Record their thoughts, and these become observation data that can be used at the next evaluation. The advantage of doing this as the program is running is that you get fresh and immediate observations that may have been forgotten by the time the formal evaluation comes along. Event or special project debriefs, or post-mortems as they're often called, a term that I've never personally been happy with, but anyway, because nobody died, to the contrary. It was a special project. If the program incorporates something new, let's say you have an event or a special project like a field trip, try doing a debrief afterwards, but recently, but in the near aftermath, while it's still fresh. Record the findings, save them as data for evaluation time. And of course, if you do the event again, don't wait to use what you've learned to improve the event the second time around. Whenever we go to a workshop or training session, inevitably we're asked to fill out a brief evaluation on our way out. You can do the same with clients when they graduate. That gives you a chance to capture information that you will not be able to get when they're gone. So a variation on this is an exit interview, and it's commonly used when staff leave. But you can also use it if someone leaves your program early. If they're willing, you can get some feedback, and even if it's negative, chances are it will be very useful for you. And finally, we talked about this already, but performance objectives. So the other side of incorporating this into performance management is that when you actually then have a meeting to look at, to measure performance objectives and your staff success in achieving them, that provides more raw material, raw data for your next program evaluation. And finally, if your program does not have an advisory committee drawn from its participants, consider setting one up. The issues discussed will give you information you can plug into an evaluation. Plus, it gives your clients a sense that they're an important part of the program and that they're part of making it better. So I'm just going to run through some key takeaways. This is not the sum of everything we've talked about, but it's a summation in some ways of the spirit of what we talked about. So first of all, look at evaluation from a different lens, not as a burden, but as an opportunity to further build on something. And I cannot overemphasize how approaching it that way makes a huge difference to actually getting through program evaluation. Integrate evaluation into an existing process, and we've just really talked about that, performance objectives being an example. Engage in a conversation with your team or advisory board about leveraging evaluation as a tool. Consider forming an advisory board to help articulate what's working, what needs tweaking, and also to help you establish metrics. Metrics being the goals that you want to achieve or that you need to achieve with your program. Remember that evaluation is the foundation of a successful evaluative thinking. And finally, getting started is important. Take baby steps. You've heard that already. I'm sorry if we're repeating ourselves, but it's really important. And finally, this is something that Martin and I know from various places, work in both the private sector and the public sector. What gets measured gets done, and that's so important in this situation. And there we are. Thank you very much for joining us. You can contact us. The email address is there, info@duetcom.com. But more important, if you have questions, and I think you'll see this on your screen, please submit them or join us on Friday, May 31st, i.e. a couple of days from now, between 10 and 11, and we'll have a Q&A session following us through from this. And finally, here's a list. There's 2 pages here of resources that are available, most of them on the OrgWise site, but I've added a couple from the Imagine Canada Library, which you may be familiar with, which is an also good resource for Canadian nonprofits. And I will say again, and I'm sorry to hear from Marty we're not being paid to promote this because I thought we were, but anyway, I will still say it. The OrgWise site is, in my estimation, quite a phenomenal resource. To have all this information, I'm not just talking about evaluation, but on so many things pulled together in one place where you can access it. And to provide things like the list of standards and so on. The difficulty with all our organizations is we're scattered. We don't necessarily have a lot of contact with other organizations. We're all dealing with the same funders in many cases, but we don't get to talk to each other about the funders. And have all these things there as a resource and as a guide is quite amazing. If you go to the OrgWise site and go to the Forum tab, and then these particular documents are in topics under, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a topic called a program evaluation or evaluation. And you go there, you'll see a lot of forum subjects that have been gathered from forums over the last 4 months or so, 4 or 5 months. These documents are actually in those topics, though I have discovered that if you have a sense of the title, or if you just put in a word like evaluation into the search engine at the top right of the page, it's actually quite good. They may at some point be separated out into a library type site. And there are other documents there that I haven't referred to which are also extremely valuable. Yes, I see that the last one here is the Program Managers Guide to Evaluation. Okay, I'm going to take this out of the barn, and out of the manger and back into where we are. This is an excellent resource, as I've said, and please use it. And if you have any questions, we might have a few minutes now, but in any case, they can be submitted now or between now and Friday for the Friday session. I hope you can join us then. Thank you very much.
I don't see any questions coming into the chat line.